I grew up in a room the size of most people's bathrooms, 3 meters by 3 meters. 6 of us, curtains where a wall should have been. One for the bedroom, one for the sitting room, and one for the kitchen. I want you to picture that before I tell you anything else. Because everything that comes after, the PhD, my 2 little boys, my life in Scotland, started in that room. None of this, not a single part of this, would have been possible without 3 people. One who I've never met, one who gave up his life for me, and one who I'll spend the rest of my life missing. In the place I grew up, you had 3 parts. You do well in school, and you hope education is your way out. You do well in football, and hope a scout will find you. Or the third path is you get into crime. I have watched this from people I call friends. One of my friends, when he was still in primary school, a police came to class, arrested him from his desk on suspicion that he had a gun. Sadly, they took him home to his house and they found a gun. His brother had been shot a few days before this. It just gives you a perspective of how, for example, owning guns was such an easy thing because there's a black market for it. And unfortunately, so many of the people I grew up with ended up in crime. They chose that path. I decided very early on which path I was going to take. One thing I learned is your environment does not determine your destination, but it will determine the direction if you let it. You have to choose your path before the path chooses you. I want to point, or rather, draw you a picture of my childhood, of where I grew up in. I grew up in a Nairobi ghetto, and I want to draw you a picture of what life looks like. We lived in a 7-story building on the topmost floor. In each floor, we had 13 houses, small houses, or rather 13 rooms, which you call a house at that time. And each room was approximately 3 meter by 3 meter room. And that meant that in each floor, you only had 1 toilet and 1 bathroom. It's crazy to think, like looking back where I've come from. So you have 13 rooms per floor, sharing 1 toilet, or rather 1 cubicle designated as a toilet and 1 designated as a bathroom. And you have to share between 13 households, meaning 13 families. And families, in an African sense of it, we grew up in big families. Our family alone, we were 6 of us, my parents, and the 4 of us, the siblings. And some other families were more. The families which had 6 kids, 8 kids, and it's normal. It's so normal back then. You grew up in poverty. There's no all this, like the current Western world where there's out of family planning because you're scared of the financial constraint. But back where I grew up, people just had kids. It was just the way of life. Grow and multiply and fill the earth, I guess. But in this house, in this floor, 13 families sharing 1 bathroom and 1 toilet. Just try and picture that. In addition to that, we never had running water, never had a running tap. So you have to go most of the time. You'll have water like maybe once a week if you're lucky enough. So meaning on that once a week, you have to go all the way to the ground floor via the stairs. That's 7 flights. Collect water and save as much as you can to use for the week. You need that water for cooking. You need that water for your day-to-day use for your entire family. For you to go and shower in the morning with your basin. And to use it in the toilet as well, because when you go to the toilet, there's no water to flush down your toilet, but rather you have to use the water that you've saved up to pour it down. So the shocking thing now when I try to think about it in the morning, when I was still working, when you have to rush in the morning, get your kids ready so that you can drop them in nursery, then you rush to work as well. And sometimes you find yourself rushing, yet you have a running tap, you have a running shower. And I look back, we had no running tap, no running shower. 13 houses, meaning in the morning, there's a queue. There's a queue to go and shower. Before you go anywhere, you have to go to work, you have to queue up. First ones to rise gets to shower the first one. So you have to wait for all those 13 households. So in most cases, kids will just be bathed in their house or outside with the basin because you can't all use one tiny bathroom, all of you. So you have to share the resource. Despite all this, I still consider, and I tell this to my wife all the time, I still consider myself to have had the best childhood. When you look back sometimes when I meet my friends, whenever I go to Kenya, my friends who grew up in the same area, or when I talk to my siblings, we just had the best childhood. Running barefoot. And I've seen Zizu does this now. Like when I took him to Kenya, I was just watching him run barefoot with other kids, and it just makes my heart melt because that's the childhood that I had, and I loved it. I loved every bit of it, every single part of it. We didn't have any phones, any social media to keep us occupied. Like now, that you see kids, we didn't have any screens, we didn't have a TV. So what that meant is just, just go and have fun, go play out in the dirt, get dirty, come home looking filthy. But it was the best childhood I ever had. I look back with so much fondness. Despite the challenges, the hardships, I guess as a child, you'll never really notice. You never really notice the hardship. You'll notice it as a parent. I'm sure my parents notice it. How they'll struggle, for example, to pay our school fees, to get us food, shelter, pay for the house rent and stuff like that. I'm sure it was tough for them. Now that I'm a parent, I know that. I can understand that. But as a child, it's just pure bliss. You're just loving it because you're there with your friends, just enjoying life, not a care in the world about anything. So then fast forward to life, going to school. In primary school, I witnessed a lot of crime, a lot of muggings in the morning, because life back there, most people, when you grow up in such an environment, you have three choices. You're going to crime, you either do very well in school and hope education will open up paths for you later in life, or you become very good in football because that was the main sport in the area, and hopefully you will be scouted by one of the big teams and hopefully make a life out of it. And I've seen my friends in all these three paths, choosing each of these three paths. I've seen the ones who've done well in school and they've done well in their lives right now. I've seen the ones who've gone into football and they did very well. They played for the national team. And I've also seen the ones who sadly went into crime and lost their lives. I had a classmate who was, once the police came to class on suspicion that he had a gun in his house, because it was so easy to get guns on the black market. They took him to his house and they found a gun. His brother had been shot dead a few days ago, so they knew that this thing runs in the family. Most of his siblings all went into crime, but sadly, none of them is surviving now. They all died. And he was not the only one. There are a number of them who went into crime because it was just one of the paths that you could take. And sadly, a good number of people took it and lost their lives in the process. So when you live in such an environment where you experience all these things, the muggings, the stabbings in the morning when you're walking to school, you're still a child. You don't even flinch because it becomes a part of your life. And all you have to do now is just walk by as quick as possible. You're not scared of it anymore. The most frightening part about that life is not the crime, is that the crime becomes normal. It becomes a part of your day-to-day life. It's not something that you flinch anymore, you're not scared of it anymore. But rather what you do is you just learn to walk faster. I decided very early on which path I wanted to take, and that was doing well in school. And luckily for me, I had the best example. My brother Sam, he was the brightest in the house. I still consider him the most intelligent person I've ever met in my life. And I've carried myself my entire educational journey in my life has always to be like him, to try and emulate him, to try and reach him, like trying to grab him and reach his level. And I never did. Even in his death, I'm sure I'll never achieve that. Even after attaining a PhD, I still felt like he was still the brightest person I ever knew. You're still the most intelligent person. And growing up in such an environment where I did, you had to sort of learn from someone like you, pick up that character for someone like you, because you don't say that, oh, you'll watch TV and you'll see a role model and try to emulate them. That doesn't exist in your environment. What you're trying to emulate is people around you. If it's your parent, for our case, my mom was a nurse, my dad was an insurance broker. We knew that, okay, there are such careers. But as a child, all I knew was my brother Sam. He was doing extremely well in school. All the awards, he used to get all the awards. Like constantly at the end of each term, when they're giving awards, he'll get all the awards for each subject. Best in maths, Sam Opar. Best in English, Sam Opar. Best in mathematics, Sam Opar. It got to a point, the teacher saw my dad, like, your son is too advanced. He needs to skip a grade. They wanted him to skip, I think he was in grade 5 at the time, in class 5. So they wanted him to skip from 5 to 7. And my dad said, nope. He will grow like every other child. He will follow the path of every other child. He might be the brightest, the most intelligent, but he'll continue on with his friends on the same path. So that's what he did. But for me, I just saw it as, my brother is doing this. And the teachers as well reinforced this in me. They were like, try and be like your brother. If you emulate him, you'll do well in life. And that's all I did in life. Just try to emulate my brother. The thing is, this did not only come from Sam, it came from our dad. Our dad used to say, education is like an insurance, probably because he was working in insurance at the time and he died while still working in insurance. He used to say education is like an insurance. It will not pay out now, but it will pay out one day in the future. You're developing a skill. You're putting something in your mind, in your brain, which no one can ever take away. A lot of things can be taken away. Our lives can be taken away. If you're in a relationship, that can be taken away. Your health can be taken away. But the one thing that no one can ever take away from you is education. So he said it, education is like an insurance. You might not see it the benefit of it now, but it pay out later. Sadly, very sadly, he never saw it pay out, but I'm leaving it for him. And ever since then, I believe that the best value you can give to your child is educating them. Not for the certificate, you don't just need the certificates, but rather the value a child gets through that process of learning, the value a child gets from developing a new skill, you teaching them, you impacting that on them. That's the most important investment you can give to your child. And that's what I'm trying to do now with my kids. Pass that on to them. Teach them every day. Through my sourdough sessions on the weekend, I try to do that. When we're out on walks with Bella, I try to do that. Teach them about patience, picking up litter, picking up Bella's poop, all these small things, because education is not just in class. It can be anywhere. It can be outdoor, just on a day-to-day life. It can be when you go to restaurants, mannerisms, around eating, around being in public, around other people, just teaching them different skills in life. Whatever I do now, if I'm assembling something, I always call my boys, come, let's do it together. They learn through that. Whenever I'm cooking, come, let's cook together. They learn through that. I was in boarding school when my father died, and due to cultural reasons, they decided not to tell me until it was time for all of us to travel to the village for his burial. For 2 weeks, I sat in my class, I ate my meals, I did my homework, not knowing that my father was no longer alive. 2 effing weeks. When they finally told me, I could not believe. I cannot describe what those 2 weeks cost me. Time I could have spent grieving my dad, just knowing he was not there. I can't explain how I felt. Then fast forward in September the same year, I lost my mom. My dear mom, my only surviving parent. But this time round, my eldest brother decided they'll not make the same mistake again. He knew how much that affected me, not telling me earlier about my dad, and he promised himself he'll not do it again. So I was in class, and the teachers came, called me from class, and told me, your family is here. And when I went and I saw my uncle, my aunt, and my brother, I just knew it. I just knew it. When you go through something once and the pain that accompanies it, that feeling, it doesn't just go away. So when they came the second time, I just knew something terribly wrong has happened. That was my mom. My dear mom passed away. Same year. I was orphaned within the same year, just at 16 years old. And I will say this was the first time I really genuinely questioned my faith. I grew up in a very religious household. My mom took us to church every Saturday, and I'd fallen in love with my faith. I really trusted in God in everything. I put my trust in God in everything I did. And for the first time ever, I just felt like, is there a God? Does God exist? Why would God do this to us? Because for a long time, I saw kids within the same building where we were living. I saw people losing their parents, and I just thought this will never happen to us, you live in that lie whereby as much as you see death or hear about death, you believe that will never happen to you. But sadly, it did. Sadly, one day it knocked on our door twice within the same year. And it was our darkest moment in our lives, a moment when I questioned everything I knew about my faith. I questioned if there's even a point living. I questioned what will life look after, because my brother was still in school, both my 2 eldest brothers, Sam and Evans. Beth was young. She had to move and live with my aunties, because there was no way that Evans was going to look after all of us by himself with no job. So she went to boarding school while still in primary school, which none of us did that. But due to the circumstances, she had to go to boarding school. As for me and my 2 elder brothers, we had to find ways to survive. And what my brother did was he stopped uni. He was in college at the time, so he dropped out of college. He decided he'll take up any manual job just to look after us. The people who are supposed to hold you up sometimes become the ones who push you down, not out of malice, but rather out of their own fear. They've already given up and they wanted company. I refused to keep that company. So losing both my parents, that's when the true challenges in life started. We probably had a lot of challenges, but we never saw it at the time because we had our parents looking after us, covering everything, ensuring that we never feel like we lack anything at all. But now it was just down to us. 4 orphan kids trying to figure it out by themselves. My brother had no job at the time. My eldest brother, Evans, he was still in college, and he had to drop out just to look after us because that was the only way for us to survive. So the issue started by me being kicked out of school because I had no school fees. I couldn't afford to pay for school fees. My brother couldn't afford to pay for that. And there's a level of humiliation that comes from that. When you have your parents, you know that even if you're kicked out for school fees, your parents will find a way, they'll pay it, you'll go back. But this time round, I just knew like maybe my life is done. And sadly to say, a number of my relatives told me the same thing. They told me, you know what? Just go back to the village. You guys will amount to nothing. There's no point trying so hard. None of you is working. Why even trying so hard to stay in the city? The little things that we had in our house, the little things that our parents had worked so hard to buy, like a TV, a radio, they're all taken away from us. Different people, when you're planning for the burial for my mom, people just came and took almost everything from us, stole things from us. We were kids, we could not fight them. They're older. In our culture, you don't argue with the elders. But this was the first time I saw Evans stand up to the elders. You know what he said? You know what? I'll look after these kids. I will suffer with them, but you're not going to the village and no one is splitting us apart. Those words still ring in my ear. People saying you will amount to nothing. Until today, they still ring in my ears, saying, go back to the village, you'll amount to nothing. You've already been kicked out of school anyway. But my faith, as much as I was doubting it at the time, by God's grace, it was uplifted once again. And this time round, it even strengthened my faith even more. When I thought like everything is just broken, everything is falling apart, just time to give up, a stranger knocked on my door and my faith had already been shattered. It was finally uplifted once again. A stranger, complete stranger to me, a lady from Australia. I've never met her, I don't even know her name, was looking to sponsor an orphan child. Right place, right time. By the grace of God, I was selected. Looking back, if it wasn't for this one particular stranger, who until today I don't know her name, never met her, I wouldn't be here today. She's one of the 3 people who completely changed the trajectory of my life, and I'll forever be grateful. She came, or rather she was looking to sponsor an orphan kid, and I was there, so my entire school fees was paid. I was told, you know what, come back to school. Your fees has been paid for the remaining year and for next year as well. You do not have to worry about school fees anymore. Your entire fees has been done. So I resumed back to school, and that day I made a promise to myself. If I ever have the means, I will do exactly the same to another child. So far, by the grace of God, I've been able to sponsor a few kids in Kenya through their school, mainly starting from kids that I know, like families that I know, and I'm hoping and praying that I can do this in scale. That promise still stands. That promise I made to myself and to that stranger from Australia. I'll pass it on, and I'll pass it on at scale. So then came the end of my high school. I performed extremely well, and I was selected to go to top university in Nairobi and do my undergraduate course. But what the next stumbling block was, yes, my fees have been paid for high school, but now the next stage is going to uni. It's still the same issue. My brother had already dropped out of college, and he's done this in so many occasions through my life. He's given up so many of his dreams, ambitions in his career, right from the start with his education, later on with his career, with his family. He gave up a lot just for me and my siblings to be able to continue to chase our dreams. He's the second person that I mentioned at the start, the 3 people. One was the Australian lady. 2 was my brother, who is the most important person in my life because he's given up so much of himself just for me and my siblings. And I don't know what I can do to repay him. I've tried in different ways to repay him, but I still continue to strive. He's one of my whys in life. He's one of my why as to why I've decided to make this change in my life, because I really want to change his life for the better. Everything I do is geared towards my family, my kids, my siblings, and more importantly, my elder brother. Because he gave up a lot. He gave up his life, basically, for my siblings and I to have the lives that we have. The life that I'm having right now is thanks to him giving up his dreams and his goals and his ambitions. So my brother ended up taking all sorts of jobs, all sorts of odd jobs, just to support us. He did painting jobs, manual jobs. He was studying pharmacy at the time, but he had to drop out because there was no way we were going to survive. There was no way we were going to eat. There were days we went without food, but he had no other way out. He was doing his absolutely best to provide for us. And every day I'm just grateful for everything he did, for all the sacrifices he made, because I am here where I am today because of him, my eldest brother Evans, and Sam, as I'm going to tell you the big sacrifice that he's made. I remember when I was joining uni, I didn't have the registration fee. Evans was doing all sorts of manual jobs at the time just to put some food on our table, be able to pay rent for us to have a shelter to live in, an even tinier house than the one we grew up in, probably less than 3 by 3 meters, but we had to survive. We had nothing, we had no one to help us, so we had to survive. And we did whatever it took to survive. But having this great opportunity to go study industrial chemistry in uni, but I had no fee to start We normally get bursary and some form of government loans, but that only comes later after you've joined. For joining, I had no registration fee or the required money to pay for accommodation, to get me up and running. For the first semester, I had nothing. And I didn't know how I'm going to manage it. But miraculously, in my head, I was managed to find the money and paid for it all. And it took me to uni, and I was well settled in, and I managed to start my uni. But the real truth behind this, I only got to know about it last year when Sam died. When you were sat down after Sam was buried, you were there with his friends from uni. So they're talking about the time when Sam was they thought that Sam had just used up his uni money for that particular semester. Because there was a semester when he spent the entire semester sleeping in their rooms because he had no money to pay for accommodation, no money to pay for his food for that semester. And what they thought was, seeing how Sam was a fun-loving person, he just used that money and wasted it in all sorts of things. But little did they know that Sam sacrificed his money for the whole semester just so that he could register to uni. I had no idea about this until that moment when Evans told them, you know what, Sam is the one who gave me money for you to go to uni. He basically sacrificed his accommodation and food for an entire semester, not knowing how he'll survive, not knowing how he'll eat, going to other people's cubicles in his friends, eating their meals, sleeping in their rooms, for an entire semester, just so that he could go to uni. I never had the opportunity to thank him because at the time when I knew about all this, he was long gone. He was 6 feet under. I wish I could tell him how grateful I am for the sacrifice he made. I am here where I am because of them, my two eldest brothers. They gave up so much for me to be here. At least for my brother Evans, I can't call him, I can't thank him, I can't try my best to pay him back, whether it's him, whether it's his kids. But for Sam, he's no longer there. All I can do is try my best to pay it back to his surviving daughter. And that's all I can do. But thank you, Sam. Thank you. Because of you, I went to uni. Because of you, I am where I am today. And I'm so grateful for it. Then came uni life. I had to learn how to survive, so I learned how to assemble computers and started building and selling them to students at a profit, of course. I downloaded DVDs and sold them around campus. Was it legal? No. Did it keep me in university? Absolutely yes. So I'm not ashamed of it. I was surviving and learning. Every business I have ever built started from that survival instinct. 4 years later, I graduated with a first-class honors, top in my class, the first ever person, ever since that course was started, to graduate with a distinction. I broke the record, or rather I set the record. That boy from a ghetto in Nairobi who was told he'll amount to nothing broke the record and became the first ever person in that course to achieve a first-class honors. I really wish my parents were there to witness that moment. These are the milestones, the moments which really break my heart, knowing that my parents, everything they put in, my dad, everything he put in, calling it that insurance, that education as insurance for me, it finally paid out, but he wasn't alive to see it. I graduated first-class honors in industrial chemistry, the first person in the history of that program to achieve it. It was a very proud moment. That boy who grew up in a ghetto in Nairobi, who was told he'd amount to nothing, has just bagged himself a first-class honors in industrial chemistry. First of his kind, top of his class. That insurance policy my dad was talking about had started to finally pay out. It's just so sad, so painful to think about it, that they were not there to witness it. They were not there to celebrate it. They were not there to see all these milestones that they put so much foundation, that they lay so much foundation for us to achieve. I really, really wish my parents would have been there to witness that moment. Everything that I've just told you happened before I left Kenya. I had never been on a plane. I had never left the continent, let alone Kenya. I never had a running tap in my house. So, next chapter, when a scholarship took me to Newcastle for the first time, what South Korea did to me, what a 600-kilometer bike ride through a country where I could not speak the language taught me, that is a different video. But I needed you to first understand where all this started from. Because the PhD, the career, the life in Scotland, the man I'm trying to be for my son, none of it makes sense without the 3-meter by 3-meter room with curtain for walls. Subscribe if you want to see the rest.